music issues today. I'm used to the music, Jody.
No, and missing the music, and we need to be able to punch up Marcus. Hey, where's Marcus? He was sitting there a
Marcus
second ago. I
took a lot. He's coming back.
did
He'll
he
be
get
up
a
in a second.
delivery from Amazon? I think he was
Maybe
over at
maybe
the
the
window.
Amazon guy. We'll see in a second. Here we are,
There he
Marcus.
is.
Amazon package, Marcus.
No,
John.
I've got a 10-year-old who's going to school.
There we go. Yeah,
We had a little
that's
breakfast
even bigger.
emergency there.
Yeah.
Make sure you get him or her out the door. All right, Marcus, here's what I'm going to start with you. A fill in the blank question on a list of many impressive things that the Eagles did against the Giants on Sunday at Lincoln Financial Field. The most impressive thing, in your opinion, was what?
Well, it's not going to be, I think, the sort of answer that you want, but it's the answer that matters most this week, is they came out healthy. Jalen Hurts didn't re-injure his shoulder, and Lane Johnson was able to get through with that torn adductor muscle for at least one more week. Without them, they don't have a shot against the San Francisco 49ers. But with them, even at 80%, they should win the game, I think, relatively comfortably. I mean, I think one of the least appreciated aspects of the of the 2022 season is that a guy who was the MVP favorite when he got hurt is back. I mean, it's just in talking to the Eagles in the locker room after the game, they were aghast and offended that people didn't appreciate more how much Jalen Hurts means to this team. So the biggest thing, the best thing that happened to them besides winning the game was they emerged healthy. Probably the second most important thing, the thing I was second most impressed with, is the continued ability of Hassan Reddick to just go. I mean, he's in the prime of his career. He's never going to be better. He's never going to be stronger. He's never going to be faster. He's never going to be more knowledgeable. And the clinic he put on, getting double teamed at, what is he, John, 250, 245, something like that.
Yeah. That was one of my concerns, and that has not that he was undersized, and he has just blown that up. I mean, he has played so well.
He was drinking pickle juice after the game. It was 38 degrees at kickoff. You usually drink pickle juice after games when it's 88 degrees at kickoff. He was just spent. So he was super impressive again. And somehow he's getting better. Usually high motor defensive end / linebackers are gassed at this time of year. He's getting better and he's getting stronger.
You know, it's interesting you bring that up, Marcus, because Hassan is very open with us in the locker room typically. And the week leading up to the Giants game, he wasn't around much. And I finally caught up to him and I said, yeah, something going on? You haven't talked this week. And he was like, just trying to get my body right. This is a opportunity of a lifetime. So he realizes what you just said. And he's so focused on being ready for these games because he knows, you may never be back in this particular position. And he's got a chance to finish it off and finish a great season with a Super Bowl. So that very astute observation with Hassan Reddick. I agree with you with the health aspect as well. Giants weren't ready for that spot. Eagles were going to win that game. I didn't know it would be that dominant, but they were going to win that football game. To come out healthy, or at least as healthy as possible, that was the biggest standpoint. Now we're talking about this is a really good team coming in here. This is a really good football team. They haven't lost in 3 months. But I got to ask you the big elephant in the room. How much do you believe in Brock Purdy? How much can you believe in Brock Purdy in this spot?
Not at all. This is a Kyle Shanahan creation. Brock Purdy's what Jalen Hurts and Donovan McNabb understood very early in their careers when they weren't very good quarterbacks is my job is to not lose the game. My job is to give the rest of these better players a chance to win the game. And that's what Brock Purdy's doing. And he's doing it to the best of his ability. But there were balls that should have been intercepted again. I mean, and
2 weeks in a row, yeah.
Well, 6 weeks, 7 weeks in a row. I mean, he's not a very powerful or accurate passer, and he shouldn't be because he hasn't played very much NFL football. But, he's not the second coming. He's not that impressive. The most impressive aspect of his game right now is understanding what not to do. And, you can debate this, and I don't know granularly all 32 coordinators, but what Kyle Shanahan has done for the 49ers and it does for Brock Purdy really I guess it underlines how good he's made Jimmy Garoppolo look all these years.
Well, let me say that, follow up with that, Marcus, because I agree with you. I think Kyle Shanahan, if he's not the best schemer, if he's not the best play caller in this league, he's probably second to Andy Reid. He's right in that category, and he elevates quarterbacks. But Jimmy Garoppolo has never played this well. Jimmy Garoppolo, has won games. The 49ers have gotten to a Super Bowl. They got to the championship game again with him. If Jaquiski Tart, our old friend, intercepts the football, they might have been back again. But he never put up these numbers that Brock Purdy is putting up. So there is a little bit of a difference. Is it just, you're right. I mean, I see those throws too, and I say, well, this could have been picked. This could have been picked. Is it just the stars aligning?
No, it's Jimmy Garoppolo never played with Christian McCaffrey. Christian McCaffrey is the X factor. That deal is going to go down. And if they go to the Super Bowl and win it, that's going to be one of the best deals in the history of the NFL. Getting Christian McCaffrey for the Panthers before the trade deadline, probably for too many assets. But they're undefeated since Christian McCaffrey. Jimmy Garoppolo looked just like Brock Purdy, if not better, before he got hurt after Christian McCaffrey landed there. So, I mean, when you have what it reminds me of is the greatest show on turf minus Isaac Bruce and Orlando Pace. You've got a relatively unknown, mediocre quarterback with Marshall Faulk on his hip. And I will argue until the cows come home, there has never been a running back like Marshall Faulk, because Marshall Faulk stayed relatively healthy. But he was the first running back who wasn't like a power runner that every team made sure they knew where he was on every play. Because, and Barry Sanders wasn't asked to do the things that Marshall Faulk did. Marshall Faulk was arguably their best receiver and their best running back. And for about a 2-year period, he might have been the league's best receiver and running back at the same time. So McCaffrey's the closest we've gotten to Marshall Faulk since Marshall Faulk. And the best player on all those great Rams teams was Marshall Faulk, the best player in the San Francisco 49ers, who has 2 spectacular linebackers, Bosa, and George Kittle, is Christian McCaffrey, because he's healthy.
Well, and thank you for doing that, because I tried to draw some comparisons between Brock Purdy and Kurt Warner. And they're there to be made. And we know how Kurt Warner's first year as a starter ended. That would not be good for the Eagles. And you mentioned the dropped interceptions this weekend against Dallas. You mean like the dropped interceptions Eagles had against Davis Webb in Week 18?
The dropped interceptions against
the Giant game, the final Giant game. How many interceptions did the Eagles defense drop Week 18 against the Giants, which they needed to win to slam the door on the number 1 seed?
A few, I guess. I don't understand what the correlation is.
The correlation is that, yes, the Cowboys dropped a couple interceptions this week against Brock Purdy. The Eagles dropped a couple of interceptions. So if Purdy throws those same passes this week, are we sure the Eagles are going to turn them into interceptions?
Yes, they're better. They're better than the Giants. Yeah.
Then what happened?
Well,
better than the Giants, but an interception's an interception, right?
Yeah. Well, just because you drop an interception in one game doesn't mean, C.J. Gardner-Johnson has been a heck of a playmaker. If he gets his hands on the football, he's probably going to pull it in. Not always. James Bradbury as well has been a heck of a playmaker.
So your contention is that the Eagles quarterbacks and defensive backs have bad hands?
Well, they dropped. I can't. I'll let Jody answer that.
No, I'll ask John. How many interceptions did
they dropped? 3 interceptions against Davis Webb. They had a chance. See, my thing is, Marcus, I don't think that Week 18 game was close, and I think a lot of people looked at the final box score. They were up 19-0 in that game, and they dropped 3 interceptions, and that they typically would get. Well, TJ Edwards dropped 1. You can't count on him as a linebacker pulling 1 in. But the other 2 are plays they typically make. I don't know how that correlates to this game, Jody, though, with, I mean, if Brock Purdy gives them a chance to turn the football over, they have to turn it over. I mean, you got to make the plays, but I don't think it's necessarily they're not going to make the plays. They've had playmakers all season in the secondary. That's how I look at it.
And they were one time the runaway leader in turnovers in the National Football League, right? But didn't finish that way. Second half, first half, they were much better at forcing turnovers, getting turnovers in the first half compared to the second half of the season, weren't they?
Yeah, but CJ also missed 5 games of that second half, and he's only been back for 2 games now, and he's and he's shown he's healthy. I don't know. I'm with Marcus. I don't know the correlation you're trying to make. If they don't make plays, if there's plays to be made and they don't make plays, they're probably going to lose the football game. I'm with you there, but I don't think the assumption carries over is what I'm trying to say.
They have 18 interceptions in 18 games and 17 tied for 3rd in the league, and they just had 1. So, again, I don't. It may be a problem. It may be a red flag, but it's a red flag that I haven't really paid much attention to. Dropped interceptions are often you get yourself in the right. My issue with Brock Purdy is he does it habitually, and I think David Webb would have had a lot of interceptions had he played more than the 1 game this season. And I think that worm turns at some point. I mean, the first Giants game goes differently. I think it was the first Giants game. If a ball doesn't go through their defensive back's hands, interceptions are hard to make, but good passes and good decisions aren't. And my point with Purdy is not that, the Eagles might drop some interceptions. It's that he might throw some interceptable passes and has thrown an alarming number for a guy who's in the NFC Championship game. But again, Jimmy G did the same thing until he sort of locked down and understood what he could do. And let's be honest, nobody throws more interceptable balls than Nick Foles. So you can be a gunslinger and get by as long as they don't pick them off.
That's true, by the way. Fans are not going to like to hear that, but that's true. When you popped on, I don't know if you heard us talking, Marcus, but we were talking a little bit about, I don't want to call it a controversy, but certainly people noticed that A.J. Brown didn't look tremendously happy at the end of the playoff win against the Giants. Nick Sirianni addressed it yesterday. It's a little banged up. They ran for 268 yards. They only completed 16 passes, so nobody was getting a ton of traffic in the passing game. Did you make anything of that, A.J. Brown's perceived unhappiness?
Yeah, Jalen overthrew him in the end zone. I want to say it was maybe the 3rd quarter, if not the 2nd.
Yeah.
And it looked like he hurt his hamstring. And he stayed in the game. He came out of the game right then, but he went back in. But he didn't seem to be as effective afterward. And he's a pretty emotional guy. I don't think he was upset at not getting the football. I think he was angry that he was hurt. And I think he is hurt. And I think that's probably the one sort of, wart on the face of the entire weekend is that, if A.J. Brown is really hurt, that compromises them because, as you guys were discussing before we came on, that if they get 105 yards rushing this week, it'll be a surprise because they'll have to run it a lot, and I don't think that's going to happen. And this run defense is pretty good. So A.J. Brown, I think he's going to be super important. And Dallas Goedert's probably going to go away. Those 2 linebackers, Fred Warner and Dre Greenlaw, they're the best they're going to face. They remind me of – everybody talked about the Legion of Boom in the secondary. The linebackers made the Legion of Boom in Seattle. Bobby Warner is just
Bobby
unbelievable.
Wagner, yeah.
Bobby Wagner is just unbelievable.
He's going to the Hall of Fame, yeah.
Yeah, and so that said, A.J. Brown and Jalen Hurts and Devonta Smith and maybe even Quez Watkins are super important this week, and that's probably the cheat code to beat this 49ers defense.
If I were to tell you, Marcus, that I think the Eagles are going to have to face McCaffrey left, McCaffrey right, McCaffrey up the middle, and when McCaffrey doesn't carry the ball on the run, they're going to throw it to McCaffrey out of the backfield. You kind of sung his praises earlier. That's what I think Kyle Shanahan's going to do. I think he's just going to try and run the ball down the Eagles' throats. Eagles are a middle-of-the-pack team against the run for their defensive ranking all year long. Do you think that Kyle Shanahan, in attempting in part to protect Brock Purdy because he's going to play in front of a crowd he's never played in front of before, do you think he just says, we're going to try and run the ball right down the Eagles' throats?
If he can. I mean, one of the other things that happened over the weekend is we saw that Christian McCaffrey might have a little calf injury.
Yeah.
He was stretching it, getting a massage on the sideline. I thought we'd see more Christian McCaffrey against Dallas, and we didn't. And every time he wasn't in, he was getting it heated and getting it stemmed and stretching it out on the calf stretcher. So, I think optimally Christian McCaffrey is a weapon, but I think realistically he might be a decoy as much as he's a weapon, because I don't think that he's 100%. Which, given the amount he's been used in his injury history, it's remarkable that he's any percent. I honestly, for all my praises of Christian McCaffrey, I didn't expect him to get abused by Kyle Shanahan the way he's been abused and still be viable at this point. But yeah, my issue, if I'm an Eagles fan, lies less with Christian McCaffrey than Deebo Samuel, who does so many things well from so many different positions. When you've got two sort of like hybrid players like Samuel and McCaffrey on the same team, it becomes very, very difficult to account for everybody. And the Eagles, Achilles heel is that all of their defensive ends want to hit the quarterback every single time. So they hardly ever hold the edge, and they're the middle of the field for them with their linebackers. They just aren't the same athletes as, those two players. So I think you'll be looking at a lot of like strange formations, misdirections, players getting the ball in places you don't expect them to get it. Because I think Shanahan's got a lot of stuff up their sleeve. So between Samuel and McCaffrey, that area 15 yards from the line of scrimmage to 15 yards downfield is, I think, where they're going to try to eat.
Well, let's talk about the guy responsible for shutting down those playmakers, Marcus, Jonathan Gannon. Was interesting. Nick Sirianni, after the game, sort of out of nowhere, put this big defense on for Jonathan Gannon. Did it again on WIP yesterday. What do you make of it? Why do you think Nick, other than just protecting his guys, and by the way, he came armed with 16 different statistics, number 1, number 1, number 1, number 3, number 4, all top 5 categories. What the heck's wrong with Philadelphia that they don't realize this is a pretty good defense?
Well, we've seen Philadelphia, and to be honest, this show and a lot of other shows call for running the ball, better linebackers in the draft, running backs drafted higher.
Not me.
And,
not this show.
And more blitzing. We got to blitz more. If you blitz, and this was true when Jim Johnson was here blitzing like crazy, it's one of the reasons Sean McDermott failed
right.
in Philadelphia. If you blitz, you don't have the horses to blitz, you don't have the defensive backfield to cover, you're going to lose games. The quarterbacks are too sophisticated, and so are the receivers. One of the genius aspects of Ricky Waters when he was here years ago is he could block the blitzer, which is a lost art. Nobody on the Eagles team could block a blitzer.
Yeah.
And he knew when to release and be the outlet, and he could hurt you. So everybody's got one of those guys now. So it's just that simple. I think the first 7 weeks of his career as a defense coordinator, he blitzed 10% of the time, which was the least in the league by 15%, right? As a new defensive coordinator on a mediocre team in a town that loves the blitz, right? Where Fletcher Cox wasn't having a good year and was being asked to drop into coverage. So Jonathan Gannon laid a very, very rickety foundation for himself, but at the time we didn't realize that he just didn't have the horses. He has the horses in the defensive backfield now to both get home. Avonte Maddox was injured coming up to hit a quarterback rolling out in the flat, and Dak Prescott had completed a pass with Avonte Maddox on him earlier in that game. Chauncey Gardner-Johnson blitzed, I think, on the second play against the Giants this time and forced an interception. Those two guys could get home. Those two guys have been hurt most of the year. So all that said, we're not a very sophisticated football town for an invested football town. And the teams that generally win are the teams that blitz the least, because blitzing leaves you open, and it's an admission of desperation. Number one, we can't cover. Number two, our defensive line can't get home. They spent a lot of money on they're spending $23 million this year on their cornerbacks alone, and they're spending about $40 million, $45 million on their defensive line. If you still need to blitz, then you misspent that money.
That's a good point. Marcus Hayes with us here on Birds 365. All right, the at times overly emotional and reactive fan base that is Eagle Nation, they're going to try and make a difference on Sunday down at Lincoln Financial Field. And although I've been more of a Brock Purdy defender than detractor, I will readily acknowledge he's never faced anything like this before. Certainly not at Iowa State, not in his handful of road games that he's played. And that's all it is, a handful in the National Football League. How important is the home field advantage to the Eagles on Sunday?
It's pretty important, but, I'll criticize the Eagles fans myself. You could take the air out of that stadium. It's really hard to take the air out of Seattle. It's really hard to take the air out of Kansas City. It's really hard to take the air out of Minnesota. And those are the comps, right? Those are the three loudest, hardest places to play in when the teams are decent. But Eagles fans, I wrote a column, I think, Saturday for Sunday about how everybody worried so much about this Giants game. Philadelphia
is unbelievable, by the way, Marcus. Unbelievable how people worried about that game.
Philadelphia fans are always waiting for the other shoe to drop.
Yes.
And I've been in the stadiums, both the Vet and the Link, where when the other team starts to do well, the fans can't, I don't blame them. I mean, some of them are alive for the 64 Phillies, right? I don't blame them, but they're thinking, okay, here we go again. It's human nature. That said, if the game is relatively close at halftime, Brock Purdy will be a different man than he was at the first snap, because he will be. He's never had pressure. He's never had vitriol. He's never had venom like he's going to see it here.
Yep.
And he's not the only one on that team, So It'll be fun. I mean, Christian McCaffrey has never been in this situation either. So it'll be fun. It'll be fun to see how he does. Honestly, dude seems cool. He and Jalen Hurts are similar in a lot of ways. The moments aren't too big for them. Though I will say in Tampa last year, Jalen looked like the moment was too big for him, but he was so fundamentally flawed and injured with his ankle that I'm not sure we got all of Jalen Hurts. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see how he responds to that, because it can be a huge factor. The Eagles fans can be a huge factor, but they have to stay engaged even if things don't look like they're going well.
Yeah. If the snowball starts running down the hill, we saw it in 2018, the 2018 championship game. I mean, the interception by Patrick Robinson, the pick six, you heard the noise over across the Delaware River in South Jersey. That place will eviscerate Brock Purdy and the 49ers. But you get three and outs to start the game. you're going to hear the boo birds, and they're going to be
even
quiet.
if you're
They're going
down,
to be booing the home team.
even if you're down 6-0. That's
Yeah.
the thing. I mean, the reality is you're one play from being down 13-0, and that's what the fans tend to focus on instead of, hey, it's only 6-0. But you know, in other towns, they're not as like that. If you're down 6-0 in Seattle, they're still going crazy. You know, you're down 6-0 in Kansas City, you're still going crazy. But anyway, you know, the fans will be a big factor. But I think the bigger factor is, you know, sort of how the Eagles weather the storm in a close game at home that they're supposed to win. You know, you can talk about the Niners and, you know, them being a slight underdog in this game. I think the line's 3.5, 3. It was the last time when I went to bed last night. And them, you know, what do they won now? 10 in a row, 11 in a row?
12.
12. They haven't lost
12
in
in a row.
3 months.
All that said, the pressure is going to be on the number 1 seed and the MVP candidate, and you know, Haason Reddick, the Defensive Player of the Year, the number 2 defense that led the league with 70 sacks. The pressure is going to be on Philadelphia, and how they respond to that pressure is going to be a big deal.
Tell me if this is a legit concern or not, Marcus. If I say ahead of time the better tackling team is going to win the game, who's going to win the game?
Ooh, well, that was a big issue for the Eagles early this season. They didn't tackle very well. They seemed to get it right after the first 4 games, I think it was. But this is a great tackling defense for San Francisco. It really is. In the games that I've seen and from what I've read, because, you know, one of the things that we are at a disadvantage, and you probably are too, Jody, is we don't get to see a lot of the other teams granularly during the season. You know, you don't see the middle of the third quarter of the 49ers Seahawks game.
No, I actually probably see more than I see more than you or John, because every Sunday I'm home. I'm watching the other games because I got to go on CBS Sports Radio afterwards and talk about them. You guys are at the game talking to the players afterwards. So I actually do believe I see more than you. And yeah, this is the best tackling team in the NFL. Eagles are one of the best tackling teams, but the best tackling team in the NFL is the 49ers.
And you think about the guys they're going to have to tackle: Kittle, Samuels, McCaffrey, who's very slippery. You know, it'll be a real challenge. And the people who are going to have to tackle are the guys in the secondary coming up. And if you play off this team, if you play off these receivers, if you don't play aggressively on the corners, I mean, that could cost the Eagles the entire game. Not only do you need to press these corners and make Brock Purdy beat you, you have to be there to support the run defense. So I would be when we could watch practices, what I would routinely do is follow the safeties and the middle linebackers to see what kind of attack they were going to have in any given week. When it was Emmett Thomas and Ray Rhodes, back when we could watch the entire practices. And it was always a tell. And I wouldn't write it because that would be abusing the privilege of watching the practice. But I would know what to look for during the games. And I would be delighted to be a fly on the wall when they're going through their defensive, their defensive game plan to see where, you know, Epps and Gardner Johnson and the cornerbacks and TJ Edwards are lining up, and how far off the ball, and, you know, whether they're going downhill or whether they're going sideways.
Yeah, those were the days when we could watch the entire practice, Marcus. Long gone. It's never coming back. That's for sure. At Inkstained Wretch, follow Marcus on Twitter, Inquirer.com. Tremendous columnist in the city. Voice of the people. I love that on your Twitter page. Sports Radio, WIP as well. You can listen to Marcus there. I'll end it here with you, Marcus. Sense of urgency. I mean, man, this was set up for the Eagles. They earned it, this number 1 seed. The New York Giants probably shouldn't have been there. They're not ready for that spot. The Eagles just a better football team. We talked about Brock Purdy. You're in the NFC Championship game. You're going to face a good team. You know that. But the quarterback's Brock Purdy. It's not, you know, Tom Brady. It's not a superstar quarterback. And then we talk about this coaching staff is likely to get pilfered at some point. We talk about all the free agents, the sense of urgency for this team to take advantage of this situation at this point in time. How important is it?
It's important, and I was astonished at their sense of urgency all the way through the season until Jalen got hurt. At that point, I think they thought they were going to cruise a little bit, but man, they were just ferocious last week. And I think we were all worried a little bit that the bye week, that the 3 games before the bye week and the bye week might have taken a little fire away from them, but they were more intense for their, divisional playoff game than they had been probably since Detroit. That was a heck of a showing in, what is week 19 for them. So I think Sirianni and Hurts and Cox and Graham and Kelsey have done a great job of making sure that this team plays as well as it can as often as possible. And that's a hard thing to do. It's the hardest thing to do in baseball, but it's a really hard thing to do in football as well. And I would be astonished if we don't get the best effort that they can muster on Sunday at 3:00.
All right. My last question, Marcus, has to do with reading stats toward a potential win. This past week, Jalen Hurts made a play on the first possession in which he ran and took contact. And he got back up, brushed himself off, and said, let's go. It was huge, not only for the gain that he got on the play, but letting the Giants know, oh, he's ready to run. So if you were thinking you could do what you did the week before or 2 weeks before, last game of the regular season, and just take out the +1 aspect of it, wrong. We're going to use them how we need to use them. And surely Steichen did, and they had a phenomenal offensive game. I think he needs to not only have that aspect of the game in play for Steichen to be able to lean on, but also make some difference-making plays, a big run or two. 9 rushes, 34 yards. That's less than 4 per carry. That's less than Jalen Hurts did all year. Is Jalen Hurts ready to make a couple of big plays? And that's may all need to be 2 over 10-yard, move the chains, first down type plays. Is he ready to do that against the best tackling team in football on Sunday?
I don't think so. And I think that's going to be the reason the game is as close as it's going to be. They don't care if Jalen Hurts runs. They have the speed at the second level, not just the third level, but the second level to run him down and hit him. So I don't think it's going to be as much of a +1 because let's be honest. I mean, the threat of Jalen gaining somewhere between 7 and 25 yards on every snap freezes the middle linebacker and the safety.
Yep.
They're terrified of that. So, and when Jalen's in the flat, there's a real possibility that he's going to gain as many yards as that rolling receiver or tight end that you're covering. So you break up, and he's gotten to the point where he's sophisticated enough to throw the ball just over you. The 49ers don't care if Jalen Hurts breaks the line of scrimmage. So that may lead to a couple of 15, 20-yard runs, but they'll gladly give that up. They'll gladly sacrifice that to keep him from going over the top, and they'll gladly sacrifice that to make sure that their linebackers and safeties shut down that, those slants and the seam for Dallas Goedert and those types of plays. But they're probably the only team in the league that has that luxury. And that luxury is the main reason, more so than Brock Purdy or George Kittle or even Christian McCaffrey, is the main reason they're in Philadelphia at 3:00 on Sunday.
You got that right. Marcus, great stuff. We always have fun when we have you on. We thank you for doing it this week. Hopefully we get you on again because that means the Eagles keep playing. Thanks, buddy.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Marcus Hayes from the Philadelphia Inquirer and 94 WIP. All right, Jody Mac coming back. Couple things I got to run by my partner, John McMullen. Next hour, we'll have another good spot for you. Rob Motti, the lead writer for the Associated Press, is going to jump in. Rob follows the entire league, but he's a Philadelphian at heart, so he's got the Eagles in his sights every single week. Marty Man will join us coming up about 25 minutes from now. But more Birds 365.